Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we've got a really interesting guest with Juliano Giannerini. And Juliano, you are the Director of Information and System Security at Baker Construction. And you've been in the IT industry for over 20 years. You were in the oil and gas industry. You're now in the construction industry. There's some really interesting comparisons that we're going to talk about that I think there's learning for all of us here. But one of the things that just blew me away about our earlier conversations is you focus so much on relationships, understanding the business, but building relationships. That's not usually a topic you hear when you go to an IT conference or you listen to a webinar or a podcast like this. But we're going to really unpack that because that's a very important part of the conversation here today, and success, and how you support the business and the end users of the business, but also your internal customers. I would love to have you, if you wouldn't mind, kind of expand a little bit on your background. But tell me, you started telling me a story about an interaction with a gentleman who was your head of financing in the company you were working with. And I'd love to have you include that as you kind of expand on our understanding of who you are.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure being with you and your audience. Yeah, it's a good story. And it's kind of interesting when I talk about, and people ask me about strengths, and I say building relationships. It doesn't really, not all the time, resonates well with whoever's asking because, well, you're a technology guy, an IT guy, and that's your strength. It's not like technical background or whatever area you are stronger at. Building those relationships really helped me having a better understanding of the other side of the table, listening out to people. So if I understand them well, I understand from their perspective, I understand how they are wired, I feel like I can provide a better service, which is our goal as a technology, as a service provider, even for internal customers. So I have this head of finance called Leo Oliveira, who is now a great friend. We don't work together anymore, but he's a great friend. And I met him in Brazil when I used to work in the offshore industry. He called me in his office once to say, hey, do you realize that you are not like an IT guy? You're not a technology guy. You are more than that. You are a business technologist. You are the kind of guy that you first of all go along with everyone. You know operations, you know finance, you know the impact if I cannot issue an invoice or if I cannot process an invoice, and you know how can that eventually impact the business in terms of revenue generation or even our margin, our reputation, and you are always willing to help. It's not just a ticketing system or a tech support function. I didn't really notice that at the time. When he first brought that up, I was thankful, flattered, but I don't think I had the whole idea what he was talking about. And the funny thing is that him and some others, like the offshore industry is very small, so we kind of talk about it in the different groups that they are part of, and ended up that him and some other people at that organization, rig managers, operations people, they used to talk about me and I didn't even know about it. At a point that I bumped into a guy on the street and he came to me and say, hey, are you Juliano? I say, yes, I am. Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Alex. I say, hi, Alex. Nice to meet you. And say, I work at Transocean and I hear a lot about you. Good things. I say, really good things? I say, yes. And I kind of had an idea because I heard about him as well because he's been at Transocean like for over 25 years. And he's very well respected. And he told me like, hey man, I have so many internal customers that they went to your organization. They talk a lot about you and a lot of good things that first of all, I'm kind of jealous about you. And second of all, I want to be your friend. Long story short, we are great friends today, but that's how our friendship started. It's really a lot because of these building relationship, let's say, skill that I have, which it's connected to my genuine intention to really help people.
Well, I got to tell you something. If this IT gig doesn't work out for you, you've got a career in sales or marketing because Like in sales and marketing, that's exactly, you understand your customer, you understand their needs, and you understand how to serve them. And to have that kind of a curiosity and just the motivation to really understand somebody in the finance department and how what you do impacts them, has great impact in them, not just always from a negative perspective too, but how it enables things, how people can be proactive because of what you're doing. So this goes into the whole area that you're really passionate about, that IT still even today can have a label as a support department and not seen really as a trusted partner that understands the business and helps the business, to the point where you very rarely see an IT person to have a seat at the table, making decisions and being seen as that integral. I'm not going to ask you why that's the case, because I think we all know that's obvious, but you talk about it almost as like a cultural thing across industries, that perception. So what you've talked about is a big way of how you address that, but how else? How do you move? You've reached the status as a trusted partner internally and even outside of your organization. What would be like the number one or two things that you would recommend to others that are tuning in today?
Yeah, first of all, I think we technology professionals, we need to be mindful that we should all need to refrain from technology professionals to business technologists. It's not that we need to give up on our passion for technology, for new products, for new advancements, but you need to understand always that the business comes first. So we need to have a business requirement. We need to have a strong business case and ROI, like a return of an investment. Technology in most cases shows up as problems that never happen and money that doesn't get wasted. When technology is working well at a scale, it's largely invisible, which is okay. It's totally fine. So how do you turn that? And I kind of had a presentation on Monday to talk about it, like how to be a trusted business partner, being a business enabler. So in a construction industry, for people that live this every day, I cannot just talk about cloud. I cannot just talk about cyber, but I can talk about what are the things we are doing in the background, our technology landscape that are helping our organization to keep things moving, how we are enabling like uptime, availability, reliability, and performance, and what is the impact for them precisely. So I gave them some examples, even though I did touch on cloud, but I gave them an example of cloud optimization, which is totally behind the scenes, but that's definitely the optimization is giving money back to the organization, which might still sound vague. But our organization and every organization, we want to increase margin, increase revenue, lower cost. So IT is not a profit center. So I told them the way I can help is lowering cost. So by lowering cost, you guys will have better margins. I cannot yet help on the revenue generation, but eventually we might. So that resonated well with them. So I had to, of course, understand how they are wired, how they think, and I had to find projects that we did, initiatives and things that we do that sometimes they just don't have visibility. So it's about turning the invisible work into visible but valuable. The other initiative I put in front of them that we had over 1.5 years is the mobility services optimization, where we managed to lower the Verizon cost in 300 grand last year. We are planning to lower even more this year. So in 3 years, we are projecting to save $1.3 million to the organization. And I told them, hey, this is not IT money, because in fact, the Verizon bill, it's allocated to the burgs, to the business units, to each of you. So this is literally money back from an IT initiative to business. And they just didn't have an idea that we were doing all of that behind the scenes.
So I'm going to add something to your repertoire of how to become a partner, because what you just did there is you became a really good storyteller. And there was a great Harvard Business Review study. They said we remember things 22 times better if it's told to us in the form of a story. And you just told a phenomenal story about what you do that helps them directly. So I'm going to add to the list of what an IT partner needs to be. They need to be a good storyteller. Is that like a part of a good takeaway, what you're talking about here?
And it's funny because when I articulated this conversation, I did talk about the invisible work. There are things we are doing behind the scenes that sometimes they don't even know. And it's our job to make them aware that those things are happening. But I also showed them, like, here's our technology landscape. And it doesn't really connect well. And I know that. But I wanted to give them a little bit of a flavor of the complexity of our environment, of the volume that we work, that we have over 900 job sites, that we have over 80 offices. We manage over 200 firewalls, reaches. And for instance, I just gave them in the last 10 days, our security operations processed over 400 million observations, and we triaged to like 15 million, which generated like 34 alerts, and it triggered like a couple of investigations. So it's kind of a funnel. I don't want to really go through all the numbers. I didn't want to go through the numbers with them, but I wanted to give them perspective, because it's not about taking for granted. It's just about giving a little bit of a visibility of what we have in our plates. This is our technology landscape. This is our footprint across the nation. So when you think, and you have all the rights to do that, by the way, or to think about it, that we are delaying one thing here and there, it's just because there is this whole complex organism that we are keeping up every day for us to be able to deliver and create value to our customers.
I'm going to go back again. You're going to be an amazing marketer in your next afterlife or something, because what you're doing is you're rebranding IT, right? I mean, my goodness. So here's one of the other things that IT, which is typically branded with, or the perceptions, the stereotypes, is that you're reactive. Like something goes wrong, you fix it, right? And there's short-term thinking about how even IT should be resourced and funded. How do you change that perception into a brand of very proactive, very pro business, which you've already said a lot there, but this short term mentality is a big issue in the industry. How do you tackle that?
Yeah, that is one of the challenges that I went through with my team when I first got here. I think it happens in literally every organization. So even in our lives, when we wake up every day and the day before, maybe let's think that we plan our day, we plan our week, and sometimes it just doesn't go as we planned. What happened? What happened is the unplanned work. So the unplanned work is what we were facing all the time when I got here. So we started making plans, not for the next week, not for the next month, but for 5 years. We were not really succeeding on executing that initially because we had a lot of unplanned activities. So we had to stop, think about the whole thing, not only our own like network or infrastructure. We need to see how everything is interconnected. We need to stop the bleeding, create some sort of a stability before we can optimize. So I told them, hey, we are now absolutely 100% reactive. We are firefighting every day. So these are the things that I see, and I invited them to, of course, criticize if they also see the way I was picturing the plan. We need to move to at least proactive by doing this, and that. And we are in that journey. It changed a lot. I can give you a good example. But our ultimate goal is being predictive. I want to be ahead, because being proactive is one thing. Being predictive, I'm way ahead of events or things that might happen. And that's our goal. Like we did cloud optimization, we did mobility optimization. The firefighting every day we achieved after we shift all the internet service provider to an internet service like aggregator. So rather than having like 20 plus service providers that we had to call every time there was an outage, we centralized in one, and they proactively monitor that for us 24 by 7. So we stopped the bleeding. And with the optimizations, we didn't just pause the spend, we reset the baseline. So that will echo for a foreseeable future is like we have a cost at this level, and now we're restarting 2026 with a full reset. It's honestly the teamwork, and the team did a phenomenal work in that sense. So I'm very proud of that. And now I think they see the big picture, they see the holistic view of the organization and how we can make a difference with impactful initiatives to the business.
I mean, I love how the constant lens you're looking at is how do I reduce cost? How do I reduce cost? Also, I love the reactive to proactive to predictive. I wrote it down here. But you had talked about before the cost of point decisions and point solutions, fragmented point decisions and solutions, and how that impacts cost performance. How does that work into the conversation that we have today?
That's another thing that happens quite often, mainly in large organizations. You have business units, you have projects, you have back office departments, and sometimes they only see their own plate. So I need this solution. So I think it's our job from a technology perspective that supports the whole organization. That's why I always talk about looking at the whole, having a holistic view of the organization. First of all, I can give an example from here. We have business units that they want like a certain DMS to Dropbox. They say, hey, we already paid for OneDrive, or we already have Box, or whatever. Those tools, they do exactly the same thing. So why would I add a second or a third if I already have that capability? So it's important to look at the whole and understand, do we have that capability internally? Is there really a requirement of that particular tool that is not covered by this one? Sometimes there is, but if it covers like over 80%, I don't really see the reason why we are going to engage on another tool. And I'm giving you a silly example, but sometimes when you talk about two, three different solutions, first of all, you have two, three different vendors. You have two, three different invoices to pay. So even from a back office perspective, you are overloading the back office because you have more. And then you have three contracts negotiations every year or every 3 years, depending on your contract term. And then you need a different skill set to support those tools because sometimes one person or one resource cannot support that. I can give you like another silly example. Like if one solution is based off like Oracle database, then you need an Oracle DBA. I don't see quite often Oracle DBAs supporting MS SQL. It's just like doctors. Sometimes the doctor that takes care of your hand is not the same that's going to take care of your foot. You have different skill set profiles. So you end up spending more in this whole context just because you're looking at a spot solution and missing the big picture.
So, what's the difference between, because you talked about SWOT solutions and shadow solutions? What's the difference there?
So spot solutions, I think it's when you only look at your particular business unit and you are missing an opportunity of something that eventually is being leveraged by another one with a different level of maturity that you could just, rather than doing an implementation, it's a rollout with a whole capacity already in place to support that solution. The shadow, it's what we don't really know. And now with the shadow AI, the proliferation of tools and people who think they really can do an IT work, just because you eventually will learn becoming like a professional on prompt engineering, there is a whole background that the technology professionals, they just go through a long time that you get to know. I usually say that sometimes you have like this shadow IT, shadow AI, that they create a lot of MVPs, but they don't create really final products that can be supportable, that are scalable, and they have a life cycle because every product has a life cycle. And it unfortunately ends up with IT to support with no documentation or whatsoever when whoever developed that just turned their backs on the organization.
You know, with the development of AI and AI writing code, that's going to be not an area that slows down. It's going to be an area that really has to look out for. I definitely wanted to make sure that we had time. You had some really interesting analogies between kind of the two different areas in your background in like a heavily governed, regulated industry versus now construction, a very low margin industry. What is the learning there? What is it you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, that was a major transformation. Everything has like a good and bad thing. I see a lot of good things coming to construction, a private owned organization rather than like a public one, highly regulated. I'll start with the oil and gas. Sometimes being part of a regulated environment, the power of the regulator will enable a lot of technology because you need to comply with those requirements. And those requirements will be enough to build a strong business case and get funding for the initiative that you have to tackle. Because if you're not compliant, you cannot operate. If you're not in line with the contract requirements, you don't get that job. But at the same time, in my 11 years in oil and gas, I went from an organization with 11,000 people to when I left like 2,500. So a lot of layoffs. I don't know if I'm going to picture that well. So you tell me. So now I'm in the opposite side. I'm in a private owned organization who is growing exponentially. So we're about to reach 10,000 employees, which we call co-workers. And just the nomenclature sounds better to me. We had a meeting last week where we talked about what are the major risks of growing fast and expanding too much. And the major risks that we heard from the leadership is about losing our culture because we have so many people coming in. We are growing, we are expanding into new markets, we are going across the nation, like 25 plus states, whatever. But we want to keep our culture. And by keeping our culture, we want to keep grounded, we want to keep humble, but we still want to take care of our people. Our core values here are people, honor, grit. So I love it. In construction, efficiency isn't optional, it's survival because it's a low margin business. So every dollar counts. So I think that's the major change. It's not a highly regulated, but I feel like I'm in an organization that really have long-term plans. Despite or regardless of the low margin, we are growing and caring about people. They say here, we want to build better structures and build better lives for our co-workers. And we heard that from the founder of the organization. He said that he learned that from his grandfather. The company is 58 years old, that when he started with his grandfather, he was working on a job and he did 95% right. And he said, Grandpa, isn't that great? He said, well, not really, because 95% is not enough. If you don't do 5%, like as great as the 95, you didn't do 100% of the job well. And we have to do 100% of the job well so that clients will call us again when they need.
Yeah. Reputation, culture. I've probably hosted over 50 different podcasts in the HR and recruiting industry and the importance of culture and what CEOs say about it, CTOs have said about it, CHROs and everything. But such a great way to underscore that. Here's what I would love to do. We've covered so much territory here that our poor human brains, we retain information, maybe two or three things at a time, max. If there was one thing that you wanted your peers in the construction industry to take away from this conversation today, what would that one thing be?
I'd say listen out to the business, listen out to the peers, build relationships. And by doing that, you will understand the real problem. And when you understand the real problem and you refine the problem statement, you fix the right problem. Because sometimes when you don't do it and you miss the problem statement, you can fix the wrong problem. You can only understand that if you listen out and you try to put yourself in their position, the way they see things.
I'll end us here with I interviewed the director of IT at Dell, and he had so much the same philosophy you had. He basically said, we're in a relationship-based business. He says, I'm in IT, but I'm in a relationship-based business. And then you just emphasize that over and over and over again. I can't thank you enough for coming on. The mission of this podcast is to bring different perspectives and different experiences and insights to our jobs so that we can all be better. And I call that the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were an amazing part of that rising tide today, Juliano. I just want to say thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. I really appreciate our conversation. And again, thank you.